Short answer, yes. Long answer, kind of. If you clicked on this video wondering if Dormitabis was as bad as everyone says it is, there's your answer. But for the rest of you, there's a bit more to the story. So, Dormitabis, a game that I don't think needs much introduction. If you've been around the FNAF space long enough, you've undoubtedly heard of it, and not for good reason. Dormitabis was developed by Nietzsche, at the time going as Blackout 1912. Nietzsche as a figure in the community always seemed to be in some sort of controversy. They were more so known in the Treasure Island space for their work on both the official series and one of the most popular reimaginings. But without a doubt, their big claim to infamy was when they were outed for a whole lot of gross things that I don't want to get into. While these were allegations, the mountain of evidence and Nietzsche's inability to own up or respond to any of it is more than enough proof to say they weren't the best person. Shortly after Nietzsche was shunned from the community indefinitely, people started to notice some weird coincidences with Dormitabis. Its story, mostly told through cassette tapes and minigames, depicted some of the weird things Nietzsche was outed for. Without the context of Nietzsche as a person, these would mostly fly over the heads of the people who played the game on release. I mean, there were for sure a couple of red flags, but the actual intent of its story was so misinterpreted upon release that it certainly made a lot of people question even liking the game in the first place. I mean, there are compilations of YouTubers completely missing the point of what's happening during some of the game's most disturbing scenes.
Quit squirming, Tina! You're only making things worse for yourself!
I've wanted to give Dormitabis a shot for a while now, but haven't been able to get over the idea that I would be entering one of the grossest rabbit holes ever. But after a while, I began to wonder, was Dormitabis, just the game, entirely excluding the story, really that bad? I know that's a dumb question, but I feel like as it's been thrown around as much as it has, the line between the game and the actions of its creator have been obscured. At least a little bit. So to answer my question, I played through Dormitabis in its entirety to see if it really was that bad. And well, I have thoughts, and not particularly good ones. So let's take a closer look at Dormitabis, the doozy of a game that it is. Opening the game, and the first thing we see is whatever this is. This cutscene has more relevance later, so for the time being we're not going to worry about it. All you really need to know right now is that this is our universe's purple guy. And oh look, the menu. I really enjoy the presentation here. This old monitor is something we're going to be seeing a lot from here on out. It's cool seeing it used in a way that won't immediately piss you off, because trust me, it soon will. I also find it really neat that the menu is somewhat unique for the time. Only the monitor and some environment are in view. I've expressed before how I usually don't like the menus in FNAF games that focus on a specific character because they generally look stupid. An earlier version of Dormitabis did this with the BOA, back when Dormitabis was supposed to be a free roam point and click game. Thankfully they pivoted. As for the rest of the menu, the extras menu is available right now from the start, which I thought was a little weird. There's nothing super important here right now, but this is where we can go and look at collectibles like the infamous tapes or animatronic renders after each night. Also on the menu is a tutorial section where you can get an in-depth description of how each of the many characters in the game work. I have mixed feelings about this, and it's due to the overall structure of the game. Dormitabis has 10 nights, which sounds like a lot, because it is. The way they get around having an interesting gameplay loop without boring you with the same set of mechanics is by adding and removing certain characters each time around. I do like this quite a bit, even if most of the time the combination of characters for a night don't work that well with each other. Because of this, I could only assume that this is what the tutorial section is for, because everything does get an explanation when it's relevant. But also, if you find yourself needing to go back and brush up on how each threat behaves, they either weren't that important enough to remember, or they weren't explained very well. Unsurprisingly, it's the latter, and that is a common theme going forward. Okay, enough stalling, let's actually play Dormitabis. Before loading into the actual night, we get this vision of a bland-looking building, but more importantly, a look at a dumpster in front of the building with a body sticking out of it. This will be kind of important later, but it's just kind of odd that this cutscene is put here and not later on when it actually matters. Because what matters right now is the office, only 12 days earlier. Take it all in. Okay, now that we've done that, yeah. This game is really ugly. I have no idea where or who I heard this from, but the game looks like how it feels when you forget to brush your teeth, and to be honest, I don't think I could ever come up with a better description. Genuinely, this whole environment is disgusting. It's grungy, textured weird, has the awful FNAF 3 green lighting, and worst of all, is located right next to an interstate. There's so much going on that it's very easily overwhelming, and I'm pretty sure that's by choice. I know I just said this place is disgusting, which it is, but you're gonna have to forgive me. I kinda like it. I don't know what it is exactly, but there's something about the style that intrigues me a lot. In a weird, unrelated way, it's like watching a car crash. I mean, it's terrible, but you just can't look away. That's the second metaphor I've used to describe this place, but I really have no clue how else I would. I mean, you're seeing this too, right? Like, yeah, it's a shithole, but it's our shithole. I don't even know anymore. In the actual office itself, where we spawn in, we're facing north. We can't do a whole lot from where we are at right at the moment, so we have to move to the opposite end of the room, where there's a table with an old monitor. We'll be spending most of the actual gameplay here. At the desk itself, we can look at the doors on our left and right, as well as upwards towards the ceiling and behind where we can find a giant FNAF 3 inspired window. The layout was a little disorienting at first and certainly led to a lot of unnecessary confusion. Once we turn on the computer, we're met with a mostly standard camera system. I say mostly because it's controlled by just a window that you can drag around and minimize. Let's just be totally honest, this is not ideal. While it's not too much of an issue at the moment, trust me that with the future threats, this will be a massive pain in the ass. The window itself is just super unresponsive, and there really isn't an easy way to navigate around it. It's an aspect of the game that everyone hates, and is seemingly added only to add artificial difficulty. Once we do get fully adjusted to our new environment, there's a phone call, which serves as our exposition dump. So our name is John, and the person calling us is Peter. He explains that he's a former night guard of Freddy Fazbear's. He tells us that we're in this situation as deep as he is, and while he can't at all protect us, he can give us some advice on how to stay alive. Peter goes on to explain that we're dead. Where we are right now is our own mental purgatory. Our memories had created a place, and this is where we are. Peter reassures us that there is a potential escape from this place, but we're gonna have to give him some time to get everything together. He also tells us the importance of collecting tapes, which, as I've already mentioned, I'm not getting into. But you're free to listen to them yourself after you collect one each night. Besides that, all we have to do is survive. He finishes off the call telling us that if something were to find us, we need to get as far away as possible and stare at it. The only active threat on night 1 is Havoc Freddy, the poster child of Dormitabis. He's definitely the simplest of the many threats we'll have to deal with. He'll spend most of the night wandering throughout the building, going from room to room. Eventually, he'll end up behind us in the window and then to our left side when we're at the computer. When he does, we have to run to the other side of the room. After a couple of seconds of that, he'll leave. Before we move too far ahead, I want to talk about the concept of the game. I have no idea what it is, but I love that you can for sure tell the idea of the game and most of the main gameplay mechanics came from a dream. Like, there's no way in a million years you'd ever come up with running under a table to get to a lone chair on the opposite end of a room in a natural way. There's too much logic in walking around the table that a dream just ignores. I mean, in a way it makes sense since this is our own purgatory in our mind. Who's to say that any actual logic needs to be present? Who's stopping us from running under the table? To be perfectly honest, I like that way more than if the game were to be super serious and try to make sense of everything, because as we'll come to find out, nothing in this game makes sense. The second night introduces us to a couple of new threats, as well as more exposition as to why we're here. Starting off with the new threats, first up is Havoc Chica. In a similar way to Havoc Freddy, she'll eventually come through the right door. The same mechanic applies here, where you'll have to run to the other side of the room and stare at her until she leaves. It's mentioned that she's the only blind threat, but I really don't see how that at all changes her mechanic. Am I Real is the other threat, and occasionally he'll shout out a number. This is what camera you can find him on. If you keep an eye on that camera for long enough, he'll change into his fixed version, also known as Cake Bear. Once this happens, you should be good to go. Back to Peter for a moment. He tells us why the animatronics are hunting us. Apparently, they're after our plasma, which they need to repair themselves, which would explain why everyone is so withered and broken, thus confirming the popular fan theory that Dormitabis takes place inside a bio-life. See, I wasn't joking about that interstate thing. The third night is more or less the same as the previous two, adding 2 new threats to keep an eye out for. Soul Cage is the primary threat and will occasionally enter through the right door. You can hear a creaking sound effect whenever he's there. You first need to turn to him, allow him to enter, and then immediately turn back and look up at the ceiling, which will actually repel him. Soul Cage's design, which is definitely one of the most unique of the entire lineup, is based off the masks and abandoned costumes found around Fazbear's Frights in FNAF 3. The second threat is Molten Evil, a super cool character who was supposed to have way more lore relevance. Every once in a while, Molten Evil will spawn in the office just behind the monitor. He can't do anything in this state, but once static fills the screen, that's when you need to look up at the ceiling until it goes away. In the phone call, Peter explains that Molten Evil is an old plasma source that was used to give life to the spirits roaming the building. That's pretty much all Peter contributes right now, and pretty much for the rest of the game. For the fourth night, not much changes. Peter isn't very useful in his phone call, but he does introduce a new character, Havoc Puppet. Occasionally you'll hear a music box track playing from behind. All you need to do is turn around and stare at him in the window until he leaves. I just want to say for the record that I don't like this design at all. It looks like an onion and it's dumb. Night 5 introduces us to what I would consider to be the two hardest threats, Havoc Foxy and Golden Call. While they have their own separate mechanics, they rely on each other to be able to do anything. Havoc Foxy will start off in Cam 5 behind his curtain. The same idea from FNAF 1 applies here, as when his camera is open, his progress is delayed. I found out that over time, it really doesn't matter since, at least from my experience, he moved at about the same speed regardless of whether or not I was looking at him. When he's about to run, Golden Call will put an error on your screen with a password prompt. What we have to do is switch back to Cam 5 where Foxy will be out of his curtain holding up a sign. We have to find the longest word and input it into the password prompt, and if it needs to be any more confusing, it's case sensitive too. Doing so will repel Golden Call, but will start Foxy's attack, where we'll need to run to the other side of the room to look at the door before he enters. It's a super convoluted mechanic that wasn't explained too well, especially since Peter's phone calls are more useless than ever. Night 6 has our final new character, the BOA, or Box of Abominations. The BOA takes inspirations from the box sitting in the office of FNAF 3. I absolutely adore this design, even if it hasn't aged that well. In the weeks before FNAF 3's release, many saw the teaser with the box and expected that an animatronic would somehow be formed from all the parts. That never happened, but what we got out of it was a pretty sick Dormitabis villain, so small wins I guess. The only thing I really don't like about the BOA are the two stubby legs that it walks around on. Soul Cage kind of has this issue too, and I think it just comes from the modelers not knowing how to make these massive animatronics fit inside this building. Anyway, the BOA functions almost identical to Havoc Chica, except it takes a little longer to leave as all of the heads have to turn away. I'm going to lump nights 7, 8, and 9 all at once here because there isn't a whole lot different between them. This is where the game starts to get real, as there aren't any new additions and the threats that are active are just different combinations. The only notable thing in terms of gameplay that I can really mention is that Night 8 genuinely took me forever. It has all of the door characters active, so Freddy, Chica, Foxy, Golden Call, Am I Real, and BOA, which doesn't sound too bad, but in practice is terrible. Most of the time you'll spend on the opposite side of the office, so you have no time to deal with Am I Real. I just hate Night 8 so much. One thing I cannot mention enough, especially in the context of Dormitabis, is the importance of playtesters, especially ones outside of the development team. Dormitabis feels like it was not only barely playtested by the people on the team, but barely playtested at all. The game's biggest flaw besides its story is how unfair and genuinely random it is. Most, if not all of these issues could be so easily mitigated by having a friend try out the game. Over the course of these 3 nights, Peter tells us about a key that he found. When he tried to use it on an exit, it wouldn't fit. He suspects that there's more out there and to be on the lookout. He eventually finds a second, but not before telling us something that we brought with us. Or should I say, someone. That would be Garvey, this universe's purple guy, and he's been taking apart all of the animatronics. And now that he's done that, he's on his way to kill us. Great. Being very serious for a moment, I didn't find Night 10 to be hard. I mean, I can for sure see why the general consensus is that it's unfair. I mean, there's no instructions except for the tutorial section in the extras. So if you already forgot about that, Night 10 is just a lot of trial and error. Every mechanic that we've learned so far has been thrown out. All we have to defend ourselves from is Garvey. He only has 2 attacks, but they both have a super strict kill timer. Probably the easiest attack Garvey can do is when he laughs. It uses directional audio, so look wherever you hear him. If you can hear him on both sides, he's on the ceiling, and surprisingly this is enough to repel him. The second attack he can do is when he gets into a vent. We have to click on the vent he's crawling in, which will slow him down a bit, and then run to the other side of the office and look at the side he'll be coming from. It's important to remember that when you run to the other side, the side that you shut will be flipped, which I think is the biggest run killer. Night 10 only took me 15 minutes across 3 attempts, the first one getting all the way to 5 AM before dying because I looked at the wrong side. After we survive long enough, a cutscene plays where we're back at the table, only this time there's a human heart. After a couple of seconds, Garvey rushes from behind and breaks the window. We run away before he can get to us. We eventually get to an exit, but he grabs us before we get there. It's unclear if we actually escaped or not, because after spamming the spacebar for a good 15 seconds, it cuts to our grave. This is the bad ending. Regardless, there's still a lot more game for us left now that we have to get the good ending. But unfortunately, I can't push it off any longer. We have to talk about the tapes. As I mentioned earlier, there's 10 tapes to collect across the 10 nights. They're all audio logs from Garvey as he details his slow descent into madness. Collecting all of these tapes is essential to unlocking the true ending. We'll need to know the history of his events for a minigame we'll unlock shortly. But to unlock that, we first need to get the 2 keys that Peter hinted at earlier. The first of which is found in Night 10 on Cam 5 on the chair on the left side. The second key is located in Night 11. Shit. Night 11, or as it's referred to in the game as simply Nightmare, is the hardest night in the game as it puts every single character up against you. This is also where we'll find the second key located in Cam 8. Also of note, since Garvey broke the glass window behind us, we can turn around and access the arcade machine, which brings us to Havoc Freddy in space. It's a weird minigame that, like most things, isn't explained very well. We have to abandon our UFO for a smaller one to take it to the end of the stage and defeat a boss of sorts. Completing the minigame gives us a pretty weird cutscene. I'm fairly certain this isn't for anything Dormitabis related, and more so for something else Nietzsche was working on. This whole cutscene is really weird, and I debated even talking about it since it seemingly has no lore relevance whatsoever, and even then, I'm not getting into the lore. Completing a Nightmare isn't required for 100%, so I didn't. I just got the key and left. However, similar to FNAF 4's Nightmare, at 5 AM the gameplay shifts from the first 9 nights to Night 10. If you're up for the challenge, I'd recommend it, but I was honestly just trying to move through this mess as fast as possible. But now that we have the 2 keys, we can talk about the Cardboard Theater. I think if there's one part of Dormitabis that I vividly remember from when it came out, it would have to be the Cardboard Theater. This is genuinely such a cool storytelling device ruined by the story in which it tells. You play as Garvey as you reenact his murders and eventual death. I really do like the visual presentation here. It's just a shame what it's depicting. It's also a shame that this minigame is super hard for seemingly no reason. You pretty much have to play as if you're speedrunning, as you only get a little over 3 minutes to do everything. It's also just really hard to navigate as there are different scenes hidden off screen and the general layout isn't consistent. So it's more memory than trial and error, which is a little disappointing. Overall, I really like what the Cardboard Theater does. It's just that, the story. I wish I could talk a little bit more about it, but that would involve having to get, too deep into this, and I'm not doing that. As a reward for completing it, we unlock Night 12. Sort of. We first have to go to Am I Real in the extras menu and click on his nose, which brings us to this weird minigame where we have to spam click his nose until he turns into Cake Bear. For good, I suppose. Why this is a requirement for Night 12, I don't think we'll ever know. Night 12 takes us back in time to Cake Bears, which is the real-life location where Garvey committed his crimes. I remember from back around the time Dormitabis was released in 2018, this was easily the most standout part for me. I thought it was super unique that a whole new game was created from what was essentially a bonus night that not many people were going to play, and I still stand by that sentiment. The gameplay of Night 12 was heavily inspired by one of Nietzsche's older games, Insanity, where whenever an animatronic were to enter the room, you'd flip up the monitor. So now that we know that, I'm sure you can guess how we're going to deal with Cake Bear himself. Havoc Puppet is also here for some reason, and is the only other threat to deal with tonight. Occasionally, he'll appear on one of the 3 cameras, and you just have to stare at him long enough until he leaves. I think it'd also be super important to mention the limited battery that the camera system has. It only lasts a couple of seconds before dying, which forces a super long recharge time. That's pretty much it for Night 12. Once we complete the night, that's it. That's the good ending. Somehow, going back in time, we've set all of the souls of Purgatory free. I think this ending confused me more than anything else. It didn't feel like we did really anything conclusive here, which just leaves me with more questions than answers. The original plan for this video was to take a closer look at just Dormitabis, but I realized pretty much instantly that everyone also wanted me to talk about Dormitabis' remaster. To be perfectly honest, I don't really want to right now, and I have a reason. When Dormitabis Remastered was fully released in 2023, everything seemed fine. The game had managed to stay pretty far away from any controversies. I don't remember how long it took, but there was eventually a document released from someone close to the development team, showing that behind closed doors, they were saying some less than ideal things. I'm saying all of this because I remember this vividly. I read that document and the many screenshots that were attached. Now, I want to preface, What the document detailed, from my best memory, was not nearly as bad as what Nietzsche was ousted for. However, it still left a bad taste in my mouth, and I haven't really felt the desire to play the remaster since. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal. People say awful things all the time, you just take that information and choose not to associate with them anymore. But here's the thing, when researching for this video, I could not find the document. I looked pretty much everywhere, and from what I could find, all traces of the expose were scrubbed from the internet. I asked around in spaces related to the Dormitabis remaster team, and the best answer I could find is that while what they were saying wasn't great, the document and exposal was made to purposely damage the reputation of the team members. It was alleged that the game's lead was Nietzsche under a new identity, which has now been proven false. So were the screenshots faked? Was everything a massive conspiracy? I don't know. That's kind of why I really don't feel like getting into it at the moment. At the very least, until I can get a definitive answer on this. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving a game a platform, especially if it wasn't very well known that its developers aren't great. Which I know is ironic, given that we're talking about Dormitabis here, but still. I really wouldn't feel comfortable taking a stance one way or the other, especially if I didn't have concrete evidence, or if I couldn't point you in the direction of it. I simply just don't know. So for right now, I'm choosing not to go too deep into it. I did actually play about a half hour of the remaster, and from what I played, it's alright. I mean, it wasn't noticeably better or worse than the original. From what I hear, the big thing is the story was changed, but I barely pay attention to that anyways. There's also a ton of new gameplay changes and new characters, so if that's your thing, I'd recommend checking it out. So that was Dormitabis. Going in, I was expecting the worst. And while yeah, this game is pretty awful in some ways, not even counting the abominable story, it carries a lot of features that made even the worst fan games popular. I think it certainly uses its environment and characters, referring to the animatronics, to their fullest, allowing each of them the room to breathe and work with each other. I did think a couple of the pairings, especially Night 8, was pretty bad, but other than that, especially when everyone's all together in Night 11, everything honestly flows pretty well. So to answer the question I asked at the start, was Dormitabis really that bad? No, I don't think so. While it has an awful and disgusting story, it's a game that still plays decently well for 2018 standards. And even for today's standards, is a nice walk down memory lane as easily one of the most influential fan games from that early wave. For the most part, I got a lot of enjoyment out of my time with this game, and I'd recommend that you play it for yourself. At least once. It's a really fun challenge trying to piece together a strategy when the gameplay has been so crudely put together. That being said, in pretty much every other sense, this game is a mess. Things are so hard to follow or even to figure out on your own. Guides are pretty much required if you were to play this blind. I think Dormitabis loses itself quite often in the story and world it's trying to build, that it just forgets that other people are also trying to understand what's going on. It just leads to more confusion, as it seems like even the core team wasn't entirely sure how they were going to tell the story. I mean, it for sure knows what it wants to be, but how to get there or even convey that, it just fails. Dormitabis just left me more confused than anything else. For the most part, I enjoyed the experience, but writing this video, I can't lie, I've been stumped and confused more often than not, often having to go back and rewrite different parts just to make sure what I'm saying is accurate. So yeah, Dormitabis from a gameplay standpoint, it's alright, but from literally every other angle, this is just not it. So I'm gonna leave it there. Be sure to join the Discord for updates on stuff I'm doing. Thank you, of course, to the lovely channel members who've shown support. I'll see you guys in another 8 months.